This is Fabiola Martinez, and I am one of the members of the Genome MBX Digitizer 5.0 by Wilcom Facebook group. And this question has come in from one of the users in the group here. And so my little video that I'm making now is an attempt to try to answer these questions for this individual. This is what she is working with. If anyone knows the answer, can I import a design and then duplicate it in the same hoop and then turn it into an applique and remove overlaps? All right, so the answer to this question is absolutely yes. Now the big question really is going to be dependent upon a couple of different things, one of which is the original design that you want to import. How complicated of a design is it? Because if it's and you'll see this in a few minutes when I work through the video, if it's a real complicated design, this could take more time than maybe possibly with a different design. Can you duplicate it in the same hoop? Absolutely, as long as all of your design pieces fit into the same hoop. Yes, you can duplicate it. Then, can you turn this into an applique? That's the big question here that's going to be addressed in this video. Can I turn it into an applique? The answer is yes, you can make an applique out of these objects. And again, depending upon that object, how much time and effort is going to be involved in that is going to be up to the user and how much they may want to invest in this particular endeavor. And can you remove overlaps? We'll talk briefly about removing overlaps because, again, that's not something that is always needed. All right, so Digitizer version 5 of MBX is what I have personally on my own computer. I never updated to the version 5.5. So in another message from that individual, they also mentioned that they were working with a Christmas tree, and being that I don't have that exact same Christmas tree, I'm just going to use one that I had in my own files that came probably as a freebie at some time back. So what I'm going to talk about next is in your program, I'm going to draw your attention first of all to that I've got several files open up right here, and I named one of them objects and I named the other one stitches. It's the same tree. It originated from a file that I got from somewhere, and it came in as a stitch file, which was a Jeff file because I embroider on Genome sewing machines. All right, so how did I get a stitch file and how did I get an object file? This is what a stitch file looks like when you open it up. If you were to expand your object toolbar over in your resequence bar, you're going to see that I've got the Christmas tree shape. I've got a spot here that looks like it's blank, but actually what it is it's the white curly cues, and we could change the color of that if we wanted to so we could see it a little bit better here in the sequence bar. Then we've got the stars, and we've got the lettering down at the bottom. So when we opened up this design as a stitch file, it left all of those stitches as stitches. Over here in the one that I've called my objects, you're going to see that the sequence bar looks quite different. You're going to see the Christmas tree green part broken up into lots of different little chunks. You're going to see that I've changed the white to pink for this part so that you can see the different little sections here, and then it goes on down to see the stars and the lettering finally at the bottom. And you're going to see that when the program changed these into objects, it broke them into lots of little pieces. But how did I do that? If you don't know how, this can actually be quite a nice tool for some designs and depending upon what we want to do with our designs. I don't want to complicate matters, but I'm just going to show you the difference. In software settings, if we come down to embroidery settings, we're going to see that we've got a really great tool in the program, and it's going to let us tell the program what it wants to do with a stitch file. Now I've already told you what a stitch file is. It is a file like a Jeff file, like what I had over here. It could also be a format for a different brand of machine, such as a PES or as a DST, etc., etc. It is a file that is meant to be stitched out on an embroidery machine. It is not the original file that was digitized. The original file that is digitized is called an object file. And a machine won't stitch an object file. A machine will only stitch a stitch file. So what we buy typically is going to be a stitch file. And when we open up our program, we can tell it whether or not we want it to leave those stitches as individual stitches. If we say yes and then we open the file, we're going to get this that we have over here, my stitch file. But if I tell it that I want to convert those stitches into object shapes, and I say OK, and then I open my file, I'm going to get something that's going to look like this. The program is doing a magic trick in the background, and it's analyzing these pieces that make up these stitches, and it's going to try to tell us what they are. Now, when we look at this sequence bar, we're going to see all kinds of strange looking things, and the more you digitize, the more this is going to begin to make sense to you. But anytime that you see an object that looks like this, like the little icon looks like this, little dots connected with nodes, that means that the program didn't quite understand exactly what it was looking at. There may be other pieces that will look like this. This is considered an open object. How do I know that? Because if I come over here to my digitized toolbar, it's going to give us the clues over here on the side toolbar. This is an open line. This over here is going to be an open line. You can see that open part of the star here. You may get to other pieces in the design that look like this. This is a design that is a digitized block tool. So you can see that the program has done its best to analyze these, and what will happen here is that the ones where it's done a good job analyzing, I'm going to actually come over here and I'm going to right click and I'm going to ungroup this. If it's done a good job analyzing it, we will be able to select that object. I'm going to turn the true view off. We'll come inside here, and what we will see here is that we've got a chunk of stitches that have been converted into objects, and if we come over here to the fill tab under our object properties, we're going to see that it called this a tatami. It gave it a good guess at maybe what fill pattern had been originally used to create this object. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on here, but this is what happens when we open a stitch file and have the program convert it into objects. Why am I even bothering to tell you this? Because what we could possibly try to do here is, maybe what we would want to try is, if we look here, we can see that we've got 3 pieces of this green Christmas tree that look like the trunk. There's the main part of the tree, and here is the top of that tree. If I were to, let me see what I'm going to do. If I were to select just this main part of the tree, and I wanted to try to see what kind of a stitch pattern it had or whatever, I'm going to see here under the object properties that it's not going to give me that option to actually look at it and convert it. The reason why I wanted to show you this in the first place, because if this had worked out well in the conversion process, we would have had a tool available to us over here in our digitized toolbox. Nope, it's not the digitized toolbox, it's the advanced digitize, where we could have had it create outlines and offsets. Now, creating outlines and offsets would make an outline around this entire piece of objects, and we could use that outline or that offset to create an applique. But what's going to happen now is I'm going to go ahead and select it, and I'm going to show you that I'm going to try to make a single run, and I've got several choices of how it would want to deal with overlapping objects. I could have them create them as individual outlines, and all the outlines are going to be full outlines. All right. Or I could have it try to intersect those outlines and weld them into a single outline. Or I could have it take those overlap portions and have them trimmed. So, you know, there's different things that we could experiment here. I would suspect that maybe I might want that one. I'm only going to do it as a single run in a different color here. Let's just see what the program does with it. I can see that over here on my object bar, we got a little piece of lavender here. I'm going to hide the unselected and see what it did. So see, it didn't take all those pieces and make a nice outline around it. Let's undo. Let's select. Why is it not showing me my design screen? Okay, let's unhide all. Let's get these 3 pieces once again. Let's try one of the other items and see if any of those work. Creating outlines, so we didn't like what it did here. Let's see what it does with this overlapping object. I think it's not going to work. See, I'm just getting funny little pieces over here. Again, I've got a piece of this lavender. If we zoom in over here, we can see that it made an outline around the trunk. See, so this tool wouldn't have worked, and it wouldn't have served us any purpose whatsoever to have converted these stitches into objects so that we could try to get this outline and offset tool to work. So I'm going to come back over to my stitch file. This is the original one. And let's just work with first of all, how would we duplicate this? Well, typically when these designs come in, they could come in grouped like this one did. I have my program actually set so that whenever I open a design, it comes in as a grouped object. And it's really simple to duplicate it. You probably already know how to do this, but one of the ways is you could just hold down your right mouse button and you could drag it and it would duplicate it. This is actually called cloning. And then I could clone it once again, and I've got 3 different pieces that are now in the hoop. All right, let's talk briefly before we do anything else about overlaps. So we can see that, this is a pretty simple little tree. Now that I duplicated it and I placed my trees close to one another, I've got little areas where the objects are overlapped. And this is where you're going to need to make a design decision, about whether or not you want to remove some of those overlaps. Now I can see if I looked, zoom in on this and I have my true view turned off, I can see that I've got some stars underneath here that probably wouldn't need to be stitched again. So, maybe I would want to ungroup those objects and I could remove some of those stars. But one of the things I just want to say is that sometimes, depending on the design that you're working with, it really doesn't make that much of a difference if we want to remove overlaps. Again, I say that with a caveat that each design is different, of course, and you would need to make some decisions about that yourself. But what happens oftentimes when we remove overlaps is that it actually even sometimes adds in extra stitches in order for the program to try to compensate for, the way that the fill pattern is going to stitch differently, and it could actually cause us to have more stitches in a design. One of the things we also have to consider is that oftentimes when we have things overlapping, it can actually be a nice design decision because it could actually add some dimension to the overlapped object. But having said that, if we are increasing stitches too much by having these overlapped objects on top of one another, it could actually cause stitching problems on our machine. So not knowing, exactly what designs are being worked with here, that's a difficult question to answer, but those are just some of the guidelines that will happen when we do remove overlaps on some of the objects. Now, can we always remove overlaps when we've got stitch files? That's a question to be answered. We've got tools in our, let's see, I think it's going to be in our editing objects, possibly. I haven't used this program in a while, so I just have to familiarize myself with where I'm at. Well, advanced digitize, is there a remove overlap in here? If I'm seeing it, I'm not seeing it right now. Stitch angles. It's right here. Under edit objects, we do have a remove overlap tool, but it's grayed out. And when it's grayed out, that means that something else might need to happen beforehand, and it also could mean that it's not going to be a possibility with what we're working with here. So let's leave that for a while and let's talk a little bit about creating appliques. So part of the original question was, can I make this into an applique? And the answer to that is yes, you can. But again, one of the things that's not available in this particular edition of this program is that we don't have the ability to just convert something into an applique. If we want to make an applique, we do have to digitize it ourselves in this program. So there's a couple of different ways that a person could deal with that. First of all, let's just say we're going to deal with one tree at a time. Because part of the original question also was whether or not this tree could be duplicated and then turned into an applique, and could you remove some of the overlaps. So let's address this issue. How could I make this into an applique? Well, come on over to your applique toolbox and digitize it as an applique. You know, it's not that hard to do. One of the main questions that probably would need to be answered is, do you want this applique to be right on the edge of this tree, or would you want it to be a little bit further out? Now, one of the things that I'm kind of wondering about the original question also is, was she intending this to be a patch when she combined these three things together as an applique? Or did she just want a border around these appliques, you know, that was a little bit further out from the trees? Let's assume, for just design purposes, that she doesn't want it on the exact edge of this tree. Let's just digitize it as a tree shape. Simple little tree shape. I'm not going to get real involved here. I'm just going to kind of eyeball it and come out a certain distance, and I'm making a very simple little tree applique shape. I probably will, yeah, probably need a little bit of a curve in here. Don't want to spend too much time on this because I'm just supposing what the answers to these questions might even be at this point, right? And here's the beginning, so I don't even have to try to overlap that. I can just hit my enter button and an applique has been created around this tree. And it made it in the same green color as the tree there. If I turn on the true view, you will see what this looks like. All right, so let's just say, for the purpose of the next part of the question, which is where she wanted this duplicated, let us just draw a box around here. I'm hitting my escape key to get out of this function. Select all, and let's go ahead and clone it. Actually, what I'm going to do first of all is hold it down, drag it, hold it down, drag it. So I have now got 3 layers of this Christmas tree applique, and you're going to see in here that this would be a very good example of when you wouldn't want these things to overlap, right? All right, so right now this design is too big to fit inside this hoop that I got, but we're just going to disregard that for now. Let's hide the hoop and just deal with the design. All right, so what we got going on now is, if I selected these appliques, it's the last step. I wonder if it kept everything grouped. What is this right here? Yep, so I think this is the applique. This is part of the tree right here. Actually, it helps to turn off the true view when you see these things here. So let's find the applique pieces. That's an applique, and I'm going to hold down my shift key, and I'm going to come down to what I think is the next applique right there. And then the bottom one down here is the next applique, and you can see that they're bright pink on my computer. And now what I can do is I can say remove overlaps. So what this is going to do is it's going to create a single applique shape. It's going to take a couple seconds for this to analyze and figure it out. I'm hoping that we're going to get a good result here with this. Still got our little hourglass there. So I'm hoping that what it's going to do is it will create that as a, might not be the right tool. I might have wanted to gone with the partial applique instead. I think that might have been a better choice, actually, now that I'm looking at this and seeing that it's having some problems. Let's do an escape and see if I can override this without bogging down my computer too much. Yeah, I think I made a poor choice on that one. All right, let's try that again. So now they are selected. Let's this time say partial applique. All right, that did it actually a little bit better. It did still keep these sections of the applique, so maybe that might not have been the best thing. The next thing that we could do, however, is, and again, just assuming that this is what has been desired, we could select these 3 things. I could right click over here in my resequence bar, and I could say hide the unselected. So everything is hidden. So what I could do now is actually I could digitize an applique, and this time I could just go around the outer perimeter of these pieces as I made some decisions about all of that. So that would be one way to come around with combining designs together, creating an applique, and removing some of the overlaps in there. So this is in the case of removing overlaps in the applique. Let's unhide all. Again, back to the issue of would we need to get rid of some of the overlaps in here? So what about if we did this? Let's undo and undo. Let's come back all the way to our original design. Let's digitize an applique just around the perimeter of this little tree. Okay, again, I'm not taking the time to do this wonderfully well because that would just take too much time on this little video, which might turn into a long video. Okay, so I'm just basically coming close to the edge here, okay? All right, again, we're back to our starting point, so I would just hit enter. This time when we see this in true view, we're going to see that the applique is pretty much right on the edge of that. And, you know, again, just a decision. Do you want this all to be, these are the steps of the applique. Oh, I didn't even talk about that at all, but whenever you've got an applique here, and you come into the object properties of it, you've got some choices about this. If I said that I wanted this to be pre-cut, I'm only going to get 3 steps in this applique shape. It's going to be a placement line, a tack down line, and a cover stitch. If I say that I want to be a trim in place, can you see that it just now added in another section over here? This would be the placement line. This one here would be a tack down line. This would be another tack down, so that afterwards we would actually be able to trim our fabric, and then this would be the cover stitch on it. So depending on how we want to deal with the fabric that we're using, you know, some different things can happen there. All right, so this whole little thing could be duplicated. Control A. All right, right click and drag, right click and drag. All right. Oh, for some reason it didn't catch that last bit of the applique. I don't know why. That's interesting. Let's try to do that again. Right click and drag. Yeah, there we go. That time it got the border around it. All right, so what could we do with our appliques? Again, different things we could do. We could try to go ahead and get it to combine those into one outline, or, you know, using those tools that we had over here in our applique toolbox. All right, so I have jabbered on long enough, I think, hopefully enough to give some ideas on duplicating a design in a hooping, whether or not you want to remove overlaps. Can you make it into an applique? Yes, but of course it's going to require some digitizing. You know, this design actually looks kind of cute just like that. So the other issue would also have been whether or not she wanted this applique, as I briefly mentioned a while ago. Did you want this to be a single applique outline around the entire design? Or did you want it to be individual pieces? So again, if you wanted it to be all the way around the design, maybe possibly a way to have deal with that would be to just select the, let's turn off True View to make sure we get our right pieces here. Let's just select our applique outlines. We could hide everything else. Hide unselected. We could use this as our boundary lines for where we wanted to digitize an applique line. And again, just going around the very perimeter of the entire combined designs. Okay. This is Fabiola Martinez, and I'm hopefully answering some of the questions about how to deal with that original question. Importing a design, a stitch file, duplicating it. We did that 3 times in the hooping. We did create an applique out of it, and then we talked a little bit about removing the overlaps and, again, some design decisions that would need to be made. So hopefully this video was helpful. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.